anticipation.
Welcome to Emotionships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I'm your
This
co-host,
sounds super boring.
Charlie Carroll, along with my lovely host, Mallory Redmond. Now, welcome to this post-election edition, episode 40
Post-election day.
of Emotionships, the podcast. How are you?
Great. Never better.
We currently do not know the state of things.
Hopefully by the time that everybody else is listening to this, we know the result of the election.
I do not expect it, believe it or not. I think it's going to... I don't know.
No,
I guess
I do not expect... No, I don't believe that because you said in a previous episode that Trump was going to win by a landslide.
I definitely thought it was not going to be as close as it appears to be.
Yeah, well, this is a great time for our viewers to...
Have confidence in every word that we say.
Well, just, to see you humbled. How does it feel?
Feels amazing.
Good. It's good.
We say here on Emotionships, the podcast, never miss an opportunity to say you're sorry.
Yeah.
It builds trust.
It's true.
So when you're less than perfect or you don't get it right, you just acknowledge it and move on.
That's true. That's good advice.
So we've got Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania outstanding. Any idea as to what you think is going to happen?
No. No.
Gilman's over there hitting TVs with his head.
Oh, jeez. No, I don't need to.
There were two forms of entertainment last night for me. I watched a lot of the coverage till about 4 a.m.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just
very engaged.
Seeing what was happening,
Okay.
and then keeping my eye on social to see what everyone was saying.
Yeah.
It was
That's a little more entertaining.
Yes. It was quite the contrast in opinions.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're left waiting.
You know what I was surprised by when I left my house this morning?
What's that?
At least in my neighborhood, people are done with their signs. They must have taken them out of their yard signs with their candidate of choice.
Yeah.
They're all gone. At least on my street, there were a lot of them. And they're just like, okay.
Cleaned them up.
Game
Onward.
over. Yeah.
We're finished.
I was kind of surprised by that. I thought they might linger for a little bit longer.
Yeah. That's, I don't know if they're ashamed of the sign that was in their yard or they feel like it's obviously not clear as to who won, though not that my predictions are super reliable these days.
Go ahead.
But I do think President Trump will still keep the office.
Sure.
Is my guess.
Sure. Well.
Just by looking at the numbers in Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. But we shall see.
It's a tight race.
Yeah. It seems to have made a number of people uncomfortable on both sides.
Yeah. Sure. Well, of course it does. It's not comfortable not knowing.
Yeah. And some of the feedback I got from our election day special is the line that you can't make government the problem until you make it the answer. That seems to have resonated with a number of people.
What were they saying? What was the feedback?
Just that it made sense.
Oh, yeah.
That I think it's like every other relationship in our life. You have to give people the power to disappoint you. And some of that's healthy, that you have to make yourself vulnerable enough that you let people in to where they can hurt you. But at the same time, especially when it comes to the government and things that you cannot control, I think there's a lot of benefit from realizing that it's not until you put your faith or hope in something that it has the opportunity to disappoint you. And the reason why I don't think it's that great of an idea when it comes to government is because in most cases, they're not going to be able to make the difference for you or enough of a difference for you compared to what you can make for yourself. And so acting as if, especially when you have the Democrats controlling the House and the Republicans controlling the Senate, the president really does not have as much power as one would think.
Mm-hmm.
And so to allow your world to be turned upside down or to lose sleep because your candidate did not get elected tells me that there's a lot of energy and motion there when it comes to your idea as to who controls your life and the potential of your life.
So what do you think is like a healthy relationship with, I mean, I guess really it varies. The end of that sentence matters, but like with the government, like, because I think it's worthwhile to be invested and to be involved and
Sure.
to vote and all of that. But what does it look like to have a healthy relationship with the government is a question I've never thought I would ask before, but that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, sure. I think a healthy relationship with the government starts on the ground level with your local politicians and the issues that they stand for that can bring about change in the community that you live in. But often I think that doesn't seem like it's enough change or that it's big enough to be worth our time. Mm-hmm. But it really is. And that's where, I mean, if you live in a specific community, it should be important that you figure out what issues are going on and how those work. I think that we need to, as I've said many times, vote our values and know where candidates stand. But at the same time, again, as we've said so many times here on the show, to act as if you can't make a difference in one person's life today is crazy. And then the other side of it is the power that you have as an individual over your own life to work toward a very specific goal with very few people being able to, if anyone, being able to keep you from that, I mean, is huge. And I think we just, when we talked about like focalism, several episodes again, I think we just get or impact bias. I think we get so sucked into the entertainment portion of the news these days that we really start to deal with impact bias and focalism to where we don't understand how much control we have over our own life. And really, when you look at it, it's how much control we have in a world that is out of control, or how we can create certainty in the midst of uncertainty. And so I think the emotion, the energy that's in motion all the time is really just ideas about what could be, and we never confront them and bring ourselves back to the greatest reality, which is we have a lot of power to stop and think and, journal out what we want to accomplish and then create a roadmap, to get there. And so I think it's the fear of missing out. I think it's the fear of being left behind. I think it's the fear of not having enough. We know that the two greatest fears in anyone's life is, am I enough and do I have enough? And so it's easy to get into, the idea of government as the answer to both of those. The government needs to make sure that I'm enough and that my voice is heard. The government needs to make sure that I have enough. But the truth of the matter is, we as individuals have so much more control over those things than the government does that it can be a waste of time when we invest so much emotional energy into the idea that the government's going to take care of me.
Sure. So those two questions, am I enough and do I have enough? How do you get to a place where you can answer those in the way that you should?
Well,
how can you say, yes, I am enough? That sounds like easy and fine and whatever, but to actually believe it, that is like a big deal.
Sure. I mean, everyone does not start in the same place based on your genes, your DNA, what your parents or grandparents gave you or your great-grandparents gave them. We don't start in the same place, and that's where there's a need for empathy and compassion. All willpower and emotional energy or drive is not, everybody doesn't have the same amount based on what they inherited. And so I think that what we're all invited to do, because everybody has a theology, everybody has an understanding of, or something driving their sense of who they are and what makes them valuable. And I think probably the best place to start is with asking yourself a question: what does make you valuable, right? Answering that question, am I enough? Often, it's like in business, we talk about culture. Every business has a culture. The question is just, are you intentional about it?
Mm-hmm.
And so we as individuals have a culture, which is a mindset that if it goes unconfronted, we'll just end up responding to and being driven by what we are given by our parents. And I think in most cases, there's not a level of awareness that most individuals have just to confront that their feelings or thoughts are not necessarily facts, and they receive those from conditioning, right, in the environment that they were raised in. And so maybe before I start working with the thoughts and feelings that I have, to make an assessment on who I am and what my value is, maybe we need to even go one layer further and say, in what environment was I raised, and what were my parents or grandparents dealing with that shaped the way I think about how I think, which includes my value and my sense of self-worth.
That's a lot what you just said.
Yeah.
How do you even do that?
Well,
Say that last part again.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a basement to that resides below where most of us consider our foundation to be, right? And that would be asking myself the question, based on a level of awareness, even from just hearing this podcast, that it exists. By faith, you can believe that maybe there is a foundation underneath that first floor that you thought was your foundation. And I think what that could be is just creating or believing that there could be a foundation that creates the matrix by which I think out of. So how were my grandparents responding to their environment that shaped the way they think about all kinds of things, to include self-worth, that influenced my parents, that created an environment that I was raised in, that would give me a sense of, or a set of thoughts and feelings and beliefs by which I have shaped my opinions as to what makes me valuable. And so maybe before I start using the set of tools that I have, that I was given in my childhood, maybe I go on a journey to say, what are those tools? What are those thoughts and feelings about what makes an individual, using this example, what makes an individual valuable? And maybe I ask myself a question in regard to, do I have the right tools to work with, or did I take what was given to me and just assume they were right because that's what I was given?
Can you give an example of a tool?
Yeah, I mean, a tool would be what makes, in this situation, my thoughts about what makes me valuable or what makes me desirable, or a person that other people want to be around.
Okay.
That would be a tool. And maybe you've bought into a narrative where your parents dealt with rejection because their parents, were living through world wars and developed a scarcity mentality. And so they were a little more difficult on their children, which would be your parents. And your parents accidentally developed a mindset that associated their worth with what they could produce or how hard they could work. And so then you were raised in an environment where your value was directly connected to how you could make other people feel. So now all of a sudden, when you're processing your relationships and what you're doing at work, or how you interact and respond to your peer group, a lot of that is shaped by that tool that says, I am only valuable when I'm creating things that other people recognize and deem to be valuable. Mm-hmm. And so this is why I think not automatically accepting our belief system, but questioning it and putting it through the fire a little bit is valuable, because most people, and this is probably the best way to summarize everything that's just been said, most people assume that the values they have or the beliefs that they have are right because that's all they've ever known.
Yeah.
And so maybe the foundation underneath what you thought was your foundation is just a level of awareness where you're willing to question the tools that you're working with. And you can't change overnight the tools that you have, but you can make yourself more aware of what else is out there, which can lead to the realization that, okay, I don't really process my value the right way, and it has dramatically shaped how I interact with people around me.
That feels like well, first of all, it reminds me of our conversation with Jeff Goins and a little bit of what he was talking about. This is more broad, but it seems difficult to like recognize what waters you're swimming in, because it's just like you're just swimming.
Yeah.
And to know that you could like switch ponds or whatever, you could go somewhere else. It's you kind of have to like go outside of yourself.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That seems really like hard to grasp.
Yeah. Well, just take the day and age in which we're living. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about in the wee hours of the morning this morning is, why would we think that anything in 2020 would happen the way you think it's going to happen? It just
Good point.
It has not been that kind of year.
Right.
And so living in the midst of uncertainty like we are, we've never been given a better opportunity to embrace and be okay with uncertainty because of the certain certainties that can exist within inside of us. And so if I know that it's not what I can do or produce that makes me valuable, or I know that the best things in my life can't be taken from me, well, then I can exist and actually even thrive in the midst of uncertainty, because I have let go of an old lie that I was conditioned to believe was true, that most of life is in control and can be controlled.
So the best things that in your life that can't be taken from you.
Sure.
Like that, I think that is super significant, because if you have the wrong idea of what the best things are, then they can be taken from you.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the people that I love following on Instagram is David Goggins, who was a Navy SEAL. And, you know, he's always putting out these videos where he's jogging, just talking about mindset. And I was watching a post of his yesterday where he is in Hell Week as a Navy SEAL, and it's 40 degrees out, and the water temperature is like 41 degrees, something like that. And one of the guys next to him, you know, is shivering and getting ready to call it quits. Then he said, you know, Goggins, how are you like enjoying this? It appears as if you're enjoying this. And David Goggins said to him at the time, like, I'm actually wishing that the water was colder. I want it to be harder on me. I want training to be harder on me. And every time I think that way, it makes this water warmer. And so we underestimate the power of mindset. And when it comes to what we've been given, just realizing all of life is faith. You know, you sat down in that chair, you know, 20 minutes ago, and you believe that it will hold you because it's held you before. But most of life being in control or in our control is an illusion. And so we work hard to maintain that lie to make us feel better about ourselves. But the truth of the matter is, you know, like David Goggins' book is, you can't hurt me. And life really begins, and this is at the essence of Jesus' teaching. When Jesus would challenge people to give their life away or to, you know, put their life on the cross, take up their cross each day, it was, if you're willing to lose it all, right, and refuse to believe that something you have or something you've done defines you, then you can't be harmed, right? Even to the extent of, my life is my life. I'm going to make the best of it, but I know that it won't be perfect. I know that I won't make all of the best decisions. And contrary to how I was raised, I will not live into this lie or false narrative that my value or sense of peace is wrapped up in getting everything right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where life begins. And for him, for David Goggins, his book is just, you can't hurt me. And so I think that where a lot of people enter into chronic states of stress and, inflammation and everything that the body does when you feel like you're in war all the time, it's just a disaster because you've believed the lie that it's something from the outside that makes you valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can let go, that's where life really begins.
So how do you maintain this like sturdiness in the midst of uncertainty after, I want to ask about like after real disappointment.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're like that thrown or that disappointed, then you weren't maintaining a level of sturdiness. Do you think that's accurate to say?
When I was growing up, this is really funny. My mom had when she was growing up, at my grandmother's house, they had an above ground pool, and what was normal at the time, instead of like the blow up rafts that you lay out on, they literally had these huge pieces of what I would describe as like the top of a cooler that's styrofoam.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're like 4 inches thick, and it's like a little iceberg out in the middle, and they're probably, 8 feet by 8 feet.
Uh-huh.
And they would lay out on those. And I remember we would try to like surf on them,
Mm-hmm.
stand on them and surf on them. And what was fun is just somebody in the pool would start making waves, and you would have a hard time standing on those because they would move with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happens every time we attach ourselves to a job or a person or a status or this thing that we think needs to happen, and same with what we said in the last episode. The government can't be the problem until you make it the solution. And so when you stand on certain ideas or certain energies, messages that says, if I have this, I'm valuable. If this is taken away from me, I'm devastated. You're always going to be controlled by your environment. Yeah. And the body does not do well when we are controlled by outside entities. And so I think where we begin is just in confronting the lie that I am a victim or can be a victim of the uncertainty in this world. So
what kind of things do you tell yourself, or do you stand on? You've said a couple of things like nothing can be taken from you.
Sure.
Or nothing.
Yeah. Well, the things that matter can't be taken from you.
So what is that for you?
Well, somebody can take my money. Somebody can take my house. Bankruptcy is a tool that the government has given business owners in order to give them the courage to continue to keep trying to provide solutions for community. I've never filed bankruptcy. I don't plan on it. But if that happened, you would be given a certain set of things that you had to deal with, but you could also start over. And so what can't be taken from you as a business person or as an entrepreneur is your mindset. And so I'm in my early 40s. I have a number of businesses. I have a tremendous amount of liabilities, but I'm using my liabilities to finance my knowledge and experience, which I think knowledge and experience makes you more valuable and that much more likely to be a resource for other people. And so what I have worked on recently is the uncertainty of liabilities that comes with trying to do anything good or make a difference in anyone's life or having any relationship. Most people are going to look at the feelings of uncertainty that comes with liabilities and run from them. Mm-hmm. What I think I'm doing and what I try to do is confront the lie that says, or the conditioning, right, is what it is, that says liabilities are a bad thing. Liabilities hurt you. Liabilities will harm you. Liabilities will take from you. I'm inverting that and saying, okay, if I can confront the energy in motion, the emotionship of not having enough, and say liabilities are like the rung on a ladder that help me take one more step forward or up, then every time things appear to get bad or I appear not to have enough, can I be patient enough and wait for the solution? Knowing that, okay, if I lose, quote unquote, lose it all, right? I don't lose it all. The most valuable thing in that situation is the experience that I've gained and the mindset that I have. And that just comes with confronting the lie that it's something on the outside that makes me who I am.
Yeah. I'm with you and I'm agree with you. And like practically speaking, if you're actually in that situation, that would be really hard to just say, look, well, I still have my mindset. I still have my positive mindset. Like,
well, you don't start there. I'll just take my situation. I've been living as an entrepreneur for 20 some years now. And I still have to confront the initial wave that hits me when it comes to uncertainty.
okay, that's helpful. That feels human.
Well, I mean, there's no way around it. You're not going to get around the difficulty and the real energy that travels with trying to accomplish things. You're never going to get around it. And so the appetite or the extent of the appetite you have for making a positive difference in the world is directly connected to the liabilities that you face, or the potential liabilities that you face. And the potential liabilities that you face and how you respond to them has a direct connection to your potential. And so, I know a lot of people that say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but when it comes to putting everything on the line and all of their money on the line to build something or to stay with it when it looks like it's not going well, they pull the plug and back out. Mm-hmm. And so there's a mindset, bringing it back to how we started, there's a mindset that really is more valuable than everything else. And you don't have to start with it. You just have to grow with it and not give up on it.
Mm-hmm. Has your mindset, how has it evolved as you've been, you're using business as an example, so I guess you can run with that. But 20 years ago when you started, how was your mindset different from how it is today? Or is it?
I think that 20 years ago when I started, I believed that the objective of everything was to eliminate uncertainty.
Yeah.
And the biggest change for me now is I embrace uncertainty and realize that it's necessary. That actually the level and the magnitude of uncertainty defines and determines the competence that I will have for the opportunities of the future.
How do you stay in a place of uncertainty without without losing some level of softness or vulnerability, or because I think it'd be really easy to just hunker down through the uncertainty and not, and almost get kind of robotic, just I have to get through this. I have to get through this and kind of lose a little bit of your humanness.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. And it's something that I am aware of. And I think it's, when someone is intoxicated and they're in an accident, they usually are the last person to get hurt because they don't tense up. Mm-hmm. Last week, we were coming back from the airport, and I told the story of getting hit from behind, and the person hit us pretty hard. And I think I dealt with a little more soreness because right before they hit us, I looked up and saw that it was going to happen and tensed up, mm-hmm. whereas Amy did not see it coming. And I think when it comes to maintaining a level of empathy and compassion, in light of all of the uncertainty and the stress that you have to deal with to grow, I think it's about relaxing in the moment versus tensing up against it.
Yeah.
I notice that I tend to become hardened or insensitive or lose my empathy when I get tense, versus just relaxing and really taking the second step into embracing the mentality that my value is not what I can do or what I can produce, but it's who I am. And uncertainty is an opportunity to reinforce that this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can respond to uncertainty and not be afraid to lose anything, because losing something, losing that thing or that relationship or that asset isn't what makes me who I am. And so I have opportunities all the time in business and in my personal relationships to be frightened by losing the current state of what is.
Mm-hmm.
And I have noticed that I tend to lose sleep and lose peace and lose an excitement for life when I don't confront the narrative or the energy in motion, because it's going to come at you whether you like it or not. Yeah. That this relationship brought value to my life, and that value is what defines me.
Yeah.
Where that is true and false is, yes, that relationship has brought value to my life, but no, that is not what defines me. And that's just an active, ongoing narrative that I am responsible to maintain in my life.
Mm-hmm. I feel like first of all, I feel like I'm interviewing you.
Oh, perfect.
I'm asking a lot of questions. But how do you once you get to a healthy view of self?
Sure.
How do you hold on to that when others around you don't have the same view of you?
It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what I know to be true in professional athletics. It's one thing to win the Super Bowl. It's another thing to stay a winning franchise where you know how to find the behaviors that helped you win and then maintain them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's much harder to stay on the top of the mountain of self than it is to get to the top of the mountain of self. And so self-care is extremely important. And then also knowing that you can't grow and become the full version of yourself if you don't go through the valleys and if you don't go through hell at times. Part of shifting and getting to a new place is being willing to go into the valley, because the valley tells you a heck of a lot more than the mountaintop does. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the places where at least evangelical Christianity has gotten it wrong, and a lot of religions have got it wrong, is we've made people think that going into the valley is a punishment, or it's something that they could have prevented by better behavior. But, just sticking with Christianity, when I read my Bible, Joseph had a very hard time for at least a third of his life, if not half of his life. Yeah. Moses faced an extreme amount of hardship, and that hardship made him who he was. I mean, if I were put up for adoption, raised in the king's palace, and then in trying to defend an innocent person, accidentally murdered someone and ran for my life out into the desert, I would have a hard time seeing myself as somebody that could still be used to have a very positive impact on millions of people's lives. Yeah. And I think in the modern day in which we live, there are a tremendous amount of us that have not murdered anyone. And yet we've done other things that we feel like disqualify us from being a person that can positively impact the lives of those around us. Mm-hmm. And so, it's going to come back to questioning my belief system and examining where there might be room for changing the way I think about how I think.
There's so many things that happen all at the same time in this conversation. Like, you're or you're kind of working through childhood trauma while getting to and maintaining a healthy sense of self while blocking out the voices that are trying to knock you off of that like line of thinking. Like it all seems like it has to kind of work together all at the same time, particularly the piece about like the childhood trauma and like maintaining a healthy enough view of self where you can stay grounded in the midst of uncertainty. Sure. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think if I had to give someone a tip, it would be to be very aware of the background or the backdrop by which you're pinning your thoughts and feelings to. And so you remember the game Pin the Tail on the Donkey? I don't know that they still do this anymore.
Yeah, they totally do. It's just that
really?
Sometimes it's different things now.
Okay. Well, when I was a kid, right, in my old age,
right,
when I was a kid, there had to be like a cork board or something there that would take whatever you were using, even if it was tape. There had to be a wall there. And when we talk about for the tail to be like taped to, there's a backdrop.
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah.
Well, it seems elementary, but at the same time, where we totally don't get that is it's impossible for us to have a negative reaction to uncertainty without a backdrop. And so the emotionship or the energy in motion in any given situation when dealing with uncertainty is some sort of lie about if that goes away or if that was not there, I would be better off or vice versa. Right. So let's take the presidential election. If people have put themselves in a situation where they are depressed or worried about one person being elected over the other, the backdrop is them placing their sense of well-being, whether it's do I have enough or am I good enough, in the idea of government, when the reality of it is the only control we have is our response to feeling uncertain or out of control. That is the primary opportunity every one of us have every day is how am I going to respond to the things that are out of my control? And so often we don't even ask that question. We spend too much time trying to fix or make ourselves feel better about what we sense to be out of control versus saying the only thing that I really have control over 100% is my response to uncertainty. Mm-hmm. My response to uncertainty is the greatest asset or liability I have. It is not your uncertainty, because uncertainty is an asset if you make it an asset, or it's a liability if you make it a liability. Your response is an asset or liability. And so when something happens that's unfair, or COVID-19 shows up and puts your business out of business, that's a liability. But my response to that liability can turn that liability into an asset and get it to serve me. Mm-hmm. And so when I use the example of pin the tail on the donkey, instead of focusing on getting the tail in the right spot, we're talking about going deeper and saying, what's the backdrop that I'm going to pin this against, which is a belief, a thought, or a feeling about what makes me who I am, or what makes me feel more secure or more valuable.
Yeah, that's good.
And so it's just like if you woke up this morning and you're struggling with fear, your effing problem is that you have put your faith in something else outside of you versus your response to what feels like uncertainty or something that's out of control. That's your greatest liability. Your greatest liability is not that somebody other than who you voted for got elected. Yeah. Your greatest liability is the thoughts between your ears that are going unconfronted about uncertainty and the absolute potential that you have with your response to uncertainty. That's your greatest liability.
You're getting fired up.
Well, I feel bad that entities and powers, people in positions of authority make people think that they're victims, or make people think that there will always be a victim of uncertainty and all of these things in the world that are out of control.
Yeah.
When the truth of the matter is, uncertainty is a tremendous asset if your response is right. If your response is wrong, it becomes a liability. And so when you look at certain people groups that are disadvantaged or have been marginalized, a lot of that has to do with the thoughts that people pay to keep in front of them so that they feel like a victim that needs a savior or somebody to swoop in and rescue them. And the stories that we tend to admire the most are the stories of people that said, okay, yeah, I've been marginalized. Yes, I have no power, but I'm going to figure a way to get up and out of this, to move up and out of this. I'm not going to be dependent upon the government or another person to control my response to what feels like is out of control.
Yeah. It feels really difficult. I mean, how many times a day do you have to kind of recenter yourself, especially maybe if you're just getting started on this? Because I keep going back to like the childhood trauma or kind of the waters that you're swimming in. And so if this is something, if uncertainty is something that you're familiar with and don't handle in the best way, where do you even begin?
Well, I think immersing yourself in podcasts with people that have been there and done that, right, is important, because their words are coming from realities that they've lived through, which contain power and insight. And so you've got to create the possibility through awareness, first and foremost, that there's a potential, or there's potential to respond to things differently. So that's the first thing. The next thing is you've got to get yourself into a different environment. You've got to change your environment. You've got to get away from some of those people whose energy is so low that they believe everything that is said to them and stay inside the narrative. Right?
What if you can't? I mean, okay.
Well,
I mean, what if it's like the people you live? What if it's like your family?
There's a certain period of time where you might not be able to move out or completely get away from them, but you can at least separate yourself from them in thought as to what makes you valuable, or how much of a victim you're going to be by your circumstance.
Yeah. So we've talked about how stress impacts, which is uncertainty, right?
Sure.
Impacts us physically.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about, like, you can convince your body that you're okay, right? Physically. Because what, in my experience, a lot of times anxiety and fear and all of that, like, it has been such a reactive response, and my body is feeling it, like, and I'm not even doing anything. Do you know what? Obviously, yeah. I'm not doing anything, but like my body is responding, and I'm not. It's just how it's responding. And so this mindset that you're talking about, can that, how does that impact us, like, biologically, physically?
Sure. It's important to realize that your body responds to what you believe to be true more than what is true. And so when I go into an environment, I mean, again, using the Navy SEALs as an example, they train and put themselves in life or death situations when they're training in order to remain calm when they get in that environment. And so, you know, the reason why their heart rate doesn't go through the roof, and the reason why they don't release an abundant amount of fight or flight hormones like cortisol when, you know, 4 of them are behind enemy lines with 1,000 enemy fighters all around them, is because they have trained themselves to put their body, their physical body, in an environment while controlling their mind and teaching their mind that they're okay. And so I think it's a gradual process of being exposed to the uncertainty while coaching yourself to say, here's what this is. Mm-hmm. I can't necessarily control it, but I can control my response to it. And one of the primary ways you do that is by acknowledging that whether you get it right, completely right, or completely wrong, whether the results of your response are great or whether the results of your response are poor, that still doesn't define you. That still doesn't make you who you are. And so your body is always going to be a reflection of your environment. The body adapts to its environment. And more than what is true is what I believe to be true. And so two people will go through the exact same hardship with different thoughts and different beliefs about the situation. One person is served by the difficulty or the hardship. The other person is crushed under it. Same hardship, but different thought process about it. And so our mind and what we say to ourselves is very important. And I think the biggest thing that clouds our judgment is all of the energy and motion that primarily comes from two things: the situation itself, and two, how we've been conditioned to view those kind of situations in what they say to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's difficult because emotional gravity is real, and the least common denominator or finding the lowest point is where your body and your mind will go if you let it. The darkest, the hardest, the most defeating thing or thought is where your body will go. And what I'm saying is, maybe you say, so what? So what if that happens? That's not what makes me who I am.
I think it's tempting to let the situation, or whether it's the government or whatever, like to let it control you. Like that's super tempting because it's easy.
Of course.
This requires so much personal responsibility.
I mean, that's uncertainty, right? Which is how we define all stress. Stress is uncertainty. Uncertainty would not exist if things could not be controlled or out of control, right? And so uncertainty is a manifestation of the reality that not everything can be controlled. The only thing that can be controlled is your response to what is not controlled.
Yeah. But I think that's why people like to attach themselves to messages of, the world will end if such and such is president, because that's an easy certainty.
Sure.
Say, we cannot survive this.
Sure. Well, again, and that's what I'm talking about. We gravitate toward the path of least resistance. Our emotions, our feelings gravitate toward the path of least resistance. It's much easier for me to believe that one person or one party getting elected is going to solve and meet my needs and make my life better, when the truth of the matter is your response to all uncertainty is 1,000 times more valuable than any political party or candidate. Mm-hmm. It's just the truth of the matter. And so, complain about the different tax rate or whatever difference you want to point out about one candidate over another, you still have a much bigger decision that you make 100 times each and every day of your life that has more potential and more potential impact than paying 10% more in taxes, and that is your response to uncertainty.
And we talk about having a life other people want to be a part of. Like that is what is so attractive about people who can stay grounded in the midst of uncertainties. Like people want to be around that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a calming presence.
Well, again, the large majority of your life is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, I would think that you want to grow the muscle of certainty with the backdrop of uncertainty. Like, I can't control what happens to me, but I can control my response to it. And I'm just saying to everyone, that's listening to this podcast, it's much easier to live your life when you confront the backdrop, which is often a lie that says, if I lose this or don't have this, everything's going to fall apart, or I'm not going to be okay, or my life is going to be ruined.
Yeah.
Who told you that? Because, history tells us that you can that a human being can overcome almost anything. But you've got to be willing to detach yourself from the lie that you have to be in control of outside factors.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be in control of outside factors, but you can be in control of your response to outside factors.
Mm-hmm.
And outside factors don't make you who or what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Who told you that?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
No, we're not getting into that. Our time is up.
Episode 40, everyone. Emotionships, the podcast. 40.
40.
Yeah,
I
the
didn't
time
know
of
that.
the number of testing.
Wow.
Episode 40.
Good. Okay.
Signing off as your lovely co-host.
Awkward ending.